Go live in the streets, you worthless failure. That was the last thing my father Reginald shouted at me before shattering a porcelain plate against the dining room wall. He thought he was kicking out his unemployed 32-year-old daughter, who drove a dented Honda Civic and could barely afford to pay attention, let alone rent. He had no idea he was actually evicting the CEO of Kingston Quantitative, who earned $60 million a year. I simply wiped a speck of sauce from my cheek, picked up my purse, and walked out into the rain. 3 weeks later, I bought his debt and became his landlord. Before I tell you how I made him regret every single word, please hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who are supposed to love you. My name is Nia King, and for 32 years I have been the invisible child in the King household. Growing up in Atlanta meant appearances were everything, especially for my father. He owned a chain of laundromats that had seen better days, but he walked around like he was the king of Wall Street. To him, success looked like flashy cars, loud suits, and a trophy wife. I didn't fit that mold. I was quiet. I liked numbers more than people. I wore hoodies instead of designer dresses. And because I didn't flash cash, my family assumed I didn't have any. This particular nightmare started on New Year's Eve. My mother Viola had begged me to come over for dinner. Just a quiet family meal she had promised. Just us. I should have known better. Nothing with the Kings was ever just us, and it was never quiet. I parked my Honda Civic a block away to avoid the sneers. It was a reliable car strictly for visiting family. My daily driver was a Rolls-Royce Ghost, but bringing that here would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. I walked into the house and the air was already thick enough to choke on. The house in Cascade Heights was beautiful on the outside, a sprawling brick estate that screamed old money. But inside the cracks were showing. Literally. I noticed a water stain on the ceiling that hadn't been fixed in months. The furniture was expensive but worn. It smelled like lemon pledge and desperation. My father sat at the head of the table nursing a glass of dark liquor. He didn't look up when I entered. He was staring at a stack of bills on the counter, rubbing his temples. I knew business was bad. My algorithms had picked up distress signals from his company's credit report weeks ago. He was over-leveraged and underperforming, but God forbid he ask his math whiz daughter for advice. To him, I was just Nia, the disappointment who wasted her life staring at computer screens instead of finding a rich husband. Then the front door slammed open, and the energy shifted. Darius had arrived, my older brother, the golden child, the man who could do no wrong, even though he had never done anything right. He strode in wearing a Gucci belt that I could tell from 20 feet away was a knockoff. The stitching on the double G was uneven, but my father's eyes lit up like he had just seen the Messiah. "Darius, my boy," my father boomed, standing up to hug him. "You look like $1,000,000. Darius grinned, flashing teeth that had been whitened to an unnatural shade. "You know it, Pops. Just closed a big deal. Crypto. The future of money." I stifled a laugh. I knew Darius's portfolio better than he did because I had tracked his wallet address. He was down 90%. He was bleeding money, but here he was playing the tycoon. And trailing behind him was Tiffany, my sister-in-law. Tiffany was a piece of work. She was a blonde woman from the suburbs who treated marrying Darius like she was doing charity work for the underprivileged. She wore a Hermes Birkin bag that I knew for a fact was real because my father had paid for it 3 months ago, effectively wiping out the emergency fund for the laundromats. Tiffany looked me up and down, her blue eyes filled with that fake pity that makes your skin crawl. "Oh, Nia, you made it. I wasn't sure you could afford the gas to drive all the way out here." I smiled tightly. "Happy New Year to you too, Tiffany." We sat down to dinner. My mother had cooked a feast: roast beef, mac and cheese, collard greens, cornbread. Comfort food that provided no comfort. The conversation immediately turned to Darius and his imaginary empire. He spun tales of investors and blockchain revolutions. My father ate it up, nodding vigorously. See, Nia, my father said, pointing a fork at me, you should learn from your brother. He takes risks. He is out there making a name for the King family. What are you doing? Still playing video games on that laptop of yours. I trade stocks. Dad, I said quietly, cutting my meat. Day trading, my father scoffed. That is gambling for people who are too scared to go to a casino. You need a real career, or a husband. Look at you, 32, and no ring, no prospects. It is embarrassing. Tiffany chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. Actually, Reggie, I was thinking about Naya the other day. I was cleaning out my closet, and I found a bunch of suits from when I was interning years ago. They are a little out of style, but I thought they would be perfect for Nia. You know, for job interviews. She reached under the table and pulled out a trash bag. A literal black plastic trash bag. She dropped it on the floor next to my chair. I also put a few application forms in there. Tiffany continued, smiling sweetly. There is an opening for a housekeeping manager at the country club. It is honest work, Nia. And you would get to see how the other half lives. Maybe learn some etiquette. The table went silent. My mother looked down at her plate, her hands trembling. She knew this was wrong. She knew this was cruel. But she said nothing. She never said anything. She was the enabler, the silent partner in my father's tyranny. I looked at the trash bag. Then I looked at Tiffany. I don't need your old clothes, Tiffany, I said, my voice steady. And I definitely don't need career advice from someone whose only contribution to society is spending her father-in-law's money. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear a pin drop. Then the explosion happened. My father slammed his fist onto the table so hard the silverware jumped. How dare you, he roared, his face turning a deep shade of purple. How dare you speak to her like that? Tiffany is part of this family. She is trying to help you. She is trying to pull you out of the gutter. I stood up, my patience finally snapping. The gutter. Dad, look around you. You are drowning in debt. Darius is a fraud who lost $50,000 of your money on a pump and dump coin last week, and Tiffany is laughing at you behind your back while spending your retirement fund on handbags. I am the only one at this table who actually has a positive net worth. Liar, Darius shouted, jumping up. You are jealous, Nia. You have always been jealous. Shut up, my father screamed. He stood up, trembling with rage. He grabbed his dinner plate, the fine china he was so proud of, and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the wall, inches from my head, raining shards of porcelain onto the hardwood floor. Get out, he bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at the door. Get out of my house. Dad, please, my mother whispered, but he cut her off. No, Viola. I am done. I am done coddling her. Look at her. 32 years old, and what does she have to show for it? A rusty car and a bad attitude. You are a disgrace, Nia. You are the black sheep of this family. I don't want to see your face again until you learn some respect, until you learn your place. He leaned over the table, his eyes bulging. Go live in the streets, because that is where you belong. You are nothing. You will always be nothing. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the anger. He was terrified. He was broke. He was aging, and he had bet his legacy on a son who was a con artist. He needed a punching bag, and I had always been the convenient target. But not anymore. I didn't scream back. I didn't cry. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was the clarity of a closing market bell. The deal was done. The relationship was liquidated. Okay, Dad, I said. My voice was so calm it seemed to confuse him. Okay, he sputtered. That is all you have to say. I picked up my purse. I looked at Darius, who was smirking. I looked at Tiffany, who looked delighted to see me go. I looked at my mother, who was weeping silently into her napkin. I said, okay. You want me to go? I will go. But remember this moment. Remember exactly what you said tonight. Because when the bill comes due, you don't get to ask for a refund. I turned and walked to the door. And take that trash bag with you, my father yelled after me. You are going to need it to keep warm under the bridge. I opened the heavy oak front door and stepped out into the night. It was pouring rain. a cold, biting Atlanta rain that soaked through my hoodie in seconds. I walked down the driveway past Darius's leased Mercedes and my father's truck that was 2 months behind on payments. I walked past my Honda Civic. I didn't stop. I left it there. Let them tow it. Let them have it. It was the last tie to the life of Nia, the struggling daughter. I walked to the corner of the street where the streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. I pulled out my phone not to call an Uber but to open a secure app. I pressed a single button. 2 minutes later, a pair of blinding LED headlights cut through the darkness. A long, sleek, phantom black Maybach pulled up to the curb silently. The back door opened and my driver Marcus stepped out with a large umbrella shielding me from the rain. Ms. King Marcus said, his voice deep and respectful. "I trust dinner was pleasant." I stepped into the car, sinking into the heated massage seats that cost more than my father's entire house. The interior smelled of rich leather and success. "No, Marcus," I said, as he closed the door, shutting out the rain and the noise and the family that had just disowned me. Dinner was strictly business. And I think I just identified a new acquisition target. I opened the champagne cooler built into the center console and poured myself a glass of Dom Perignon. As the car pulled away, gliding smoothly toward my penthouse in Buckhead, I pulled up my iPad. I logged into the terminal. I typed in a search query, King's Laundromat LLC, Laundromat, LL. Status delinquent. Major creditor Peachtree Regional Bank. I took a sip of champagne. The bubbles tasted like victory. My father wanted me to live in the streets. Well, I was about to buy the pavement right from under his feet. "Drive, Marcus," I said, looking out the window at the city skyline. "We have a busy morning tomorrow. I need to call the bank." This was not just an eviction. This was a hostile takeover. And the Kings had no idea who they had just declared war on. The next morning did not find me sleeping under a bridge or begging for change on a street corner. Instead, I stood on the 45th floor of the Sovereign Tower, looking out at the Atlanta skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass. This was the headquarters of Kingston Quantitative. My name was on the building directory, but my family had never bothered to Google it. To them, I was just Nia, the girl who fixed their Wi-Fi. To the financial world, I was a phantom. I walked through the double-glass doors and the atmosphere shifted instantly. The hum of conversation died down. Analysts in $5,000 suits straightened their ties. My executive assistant Sarah was waiting with a double espresso and a tablet. "Good morning, Ms. King," Sarah said, falling into step beside me. "The Asian markets closed up 3%. Your algorithm for the yen carry trade executed perfectly while you were sleeping. We are up 4.2 million since midnight." I took the coffee without breaking stride. "Thank you, Sarah. Set up a meeting with legal at 10. I have an acquisition I want to fast-track." As I walked into my corner office, I caught my reflection in the glass. I wasn't wearing the hoodie and jeans my father hated. I was wearing a cream-colored bespoke suit that cost more than my brother's car. This was the reality my family refused to see. They thought wealth was loud. They thought it was logos and leasing cars you could not afford. They didn't understand that real wealth is silent. Real wealth is math. I sat at my desk, which was a command center of 6 monitors. I didn't trade stocks based on gut feelings or tips from buddies at the golf course like my brother Darius. I was a quant. I built mathematical models that identified inefficiencies in the market and exploited them in microseconds. I made money when the market went up, and I made even more when it crashed. While my father was stressing over the price of detergent for his laundromats, I was leveraging volatility to generate $60 million a year in pure profit. I unlocked my phone and opened the security app connected to my old bedroom in my parents' house. I had installed the hidden camera years ago not to spy on them, but to protect myself. I needed to know when they were snooping through my things. On the screen, I saw my mother Viola. She was inside my room. She held a black trash bag open. I watched in silence as she picked up the few things I had left behind. My high school diploma, my coding competition trophies, the framed photo of me and my grandmother. She didn't look angry. She looked resigned. She was erasing me from the house efficiently and quietly, just like she had erased me from her heart years ago. She dropped the photo into the trash bag and tied it shut. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was her. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Part of me, the part that was still a little girl wanting her mommy, wanted to ignore it. But the CEO part of me knew that information was power. I swiped answer. "Hello, mother," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion she usually manipulated. "Nia. Thank God you answered." Her voice was a hushed whisper, like she was afraid my father might hear her. "Where are you? Are you safe?" I was so worried I hardly slept. I looked around my 3,000 square foot office with its Italian marble floors. "I am fine, mother. Listen to me, baby. You know how your father gets. His blood pressure is through the roof. The business is in trouble, and he is just taking it out on everyone. He didn't mean what he said last night. He threw a plate at my head." "Mother," I said, "he told me to live in the street. He was just venting." Viola pleaded. "You know he loves you deep down. He is just a proud man. Listen, I talked to him this morning. I calmed him down. He said if you come back today and apologize to him and Darius, he will let you come home." I almost laughed. It was a bitter, sharp sound that got caught in my throat. Apologize for what? For existing. For not being the son he wanted. Just be the bigger person, Nia. Do it for me. I can't stand the tension in this house. If you apologize, he said you can move into the basement suite. It is not ideal, I know, but it is better than being homeless. We will just move your things down there, and you can stay out of his way until he cools off. The basement. The damp, unfinished basement where we stored the Christmas decorations and the broken appliances. That was the value they placed on me. Below ground, out of sight. I looked at the monitor on my left, which showed my bank account balance growing by the second. "Mother," I said slowly, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not coming back. I am not apologizing to Darius for being a failure, and I am certainly not apologizing to Dad for his temper. Nia, don't be stubborn. You have nowhere else to go. You have no money. You have no job. Do you want to end up in a shelter? I have a job, Mother. I have always had a job. You just never asked what it was. Doing what? Fixing computers that won't pay rent in Atlanta. Please, baby, just come home. Swallow your pride. It is cold outside." I watched the security feed on my phone. I saw her drag the trash bag full of my memories to the door. She was kicking me out with one hand and trying to drag me back into the dungeon with the other. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. She didn't want me back because she loved me. She wanted me back because she needed a buffer. She needed someone else for Dad to scream at so he wouldn't scream at her. "I am not coming to the basement, Mother, and you can tell Dad to save his energy. He is going to need it." "What do you mean?" "I mean that the next time I step foot in that house, I will be walking through the front door and I won't be asking for permission." "Nia, you are talking nonsense. Just tell me where you are. I am exactly where I belong." "Goodbye, Mother." I hung up the phone before she could say another word. My hand was shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from rage. The audacity of that woman. She watched her husband abuse her daughter for decades, and her solution was always to ask the victim to apologize to the abuser. She was weak. And in business, weakness was a liability. I tapped the intercom on my desk. "Sarah, get me the file on Peachtree Regional Bank, specifically their distressed asset division." "Right away, Ms. King." I spun my chair around to face the window again. The rain had stopped and the sun was breaking through the clouds over Atlanta. My father wanted a war. My brother wanted to play pretend businessman. My sister-in-law wanted to treat me like hired help. They thought they had discarded a pawn. They had no idea they had just woke up the queen. I pulled up the credit report for King's Laundromats again. The numbers were ugly. Missed payments, liens, they were drowning. My father was trying to keep afloat by draining equity from the house. The house that my grandmother had bought. The house that was supposed to be the family legacy. He was going to lose it all within 6 months, unless someone intervened. I wasn't going to save him. Saving him would mean paying his debts and letting him pretend he was still the patriarch. No, I was going to do something much more effective. I picked up my pen and wrote a single figure on a notepad. $2.4 million. That was the price of their freedom. That was the price of their pride. I was going to buy it. And then I was going to foreclose on their ego. While I was plotting a corporate takeover from my penthouse office, my brother Darius and his wife Tiffany were busy digging the family grave at the Ansley Golf Club. It was a Tuesday afternoon, which meant Darius should have been managing the auto parts chain my father had spent 40 years building. Instead, he was sitting on a terrace overlooking the 18th hole, nursing a scotch he could not afford, and listening to Tiffany complain about the one thing she felt she was owed by the universe: a yacht. Tiffany adjusted her oversized sunglasses and pointed a manicured finger toward the lake where the Henderson family was docking their new boat. "Look at that, Darius. That is a 30-footer. Karen Henderson is looking over here right now, and I know she is laughing at us. Last week at the gala, she asked me if we were renting our summer home." Renting Darius? Do you know how humiliating that is? I married a king. I did not marry a pauper. Darius loosened his tie. He was sweating despite the mild weather. "Babe, I told you. The cash flow is a little tight right now. The supply chain issues are hitting the stores hard. We just have to wait for the next quarter." Tiffany slammed her fork down onto her salad. "I am sick of hearing about quarters, Darius. I am sick of waiting. You promised me that when I married you, I would be the queen of Atlanta society. But look at me. I am driving a 2-year-old Range Rover. I am wearing last season's Van Cleef, and now I have to sit here and watch Karen flaunt her wealth while I sip tap water." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You know my mother warned me about marrying into your family. She said your people handle money differently. She said you lack the instinct for generational wealth. I defended you, Darius. I told her you were different. I told her you were one of the good ones. Don't make a liar out of me." Darius flinched. He always did when she brought up her family or made those subtle digs at his race. Tiffany liked the prestige of the king name, and she certainly liked the money, but she looked down on the very culture that produced it. She refused to go to my aunt's barbecues, claiming the music was too loud. She rolled her eyes at our church services. She treated my father like a walking ATM machine while mocking his accent behind his back. "I am going to fix it," Darius said, his voice trembling slightly. "I have a plan." "You better," Tiffany snapped, picking up her phone to scroll through Instagram. "Because the club is hosting the regatta next month. If we don't have a boat by then, don't expect me to show up on your arm." I refuse to be embarrassed in front of my friends. Darius drained his glass. He didn't have a plan. He had a hole. A massive, gaping financial hole that was swallowing him whole. The truth about King's Auto Parts was ugly. When my father ran it, the business was a well-oiled machine. It wasn't flashy, but it was profitable. He had loyal customers and reliable vendors. But 2 years ago, when his health started to decline, he handed the keys to the kingdom over to Darius. Darius didn't want to sell alternators and brake pads. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He fired the store manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had worked for us for 20 years, because he said the man was too old school. He replaced him with his college fraternity brothers, who spent more time playing fantasy football in the back office than managing inventory. The shelves began to empty. Customers started going to AutoZone. Vendors who hadn't been paid in 90 days put the company on credit hold. But Darius didn't care about the day-to-day operations. He was chasing the dragon of easy money. He pulled out his phone under the table and opened his crypto exchange app. His stomach churned. The graph was a steep red line plunging straight down. 3 weeks ago, Darius had taken $50,000 from the company payroll account, money meant to pay the delivery drivers and the cashiers, and dumped it into a new meme coin called Moonrocket. A guy on a Discord server had guaranteed it would go up 100 times in value. Darius had done the math in his head. 50,000 would become 5 million. He would buy the yacht. He would buy Tiffany a new diamond. He would finally be the genius everyone thought he was. But the rocket had crashed. The coin was rug pulled. The developers had vanished with the liquidity, and Darius was staring at a balance of $412. He closed the app before Tiffany could see. He felt like he was going to throw up. Payroll was due on Friday. If the checks bounced, the employees would walk out. The business would collapse. And if the business collapsed, the facade of his life would crumble. Tiffany would leave him. His father would realize he was a failure. He needed money, fast. He needed a lifeline. He looked at Tiffany, who was busy taking a selfie with her salad, ensuring the country club logo was visible in the background. She didn't care how he got the money. She just wanted the lifestyle. "I have to go see Dad," Darius said, standing up abruptly. Tiffany didn't even look up. "Good. Make sure you tell him that the yacht needs to be white. It looks better in photos." Darius drove to my parents' house, not in the company truck, but in his leased Mercedes. He rehearsed his lie on the way over. He couldn't tell Reggie the truth. He couldn't say, "Dad, I gambled the employee salaries on internet magic money and lost." That would kill the old man. No, he had to frame it as an opportunity. He found my father in the den, sitting in his leather armchair, staring at a photo of me and Darius from when we were kids. My father looked tired. The stress of the eviction argument the night before had taken a toll on him. "Hey, Pops," Darius said, putting on his best salesman smile. Reggie looked up, his eyes brightening instantly. "Son, I didn't expect to see you. Is everything all right?" "Everything is great, Pops. Better than great." Darius sat on the ottoman, leaning forward with fake intensity. "Listen, I just came from a meeting with a major supplier. They are offering us a once-in-a-lifetime deal. If we can buy inventory in bulk right now, we can lock in prices for the next 5 years. We are talking about tripling our profit margins." Reggie nodded slowly. "That sounds smart, son. Buying in bulk is always good. But do we have the cash on hand?" "That is the thing," Darius said. "We need liquidity to close the deal. The bank is dragging its feet on the commercial line of credit because of the economy. But I don't want to miss this window." Reggie frowned. "So what are you suggesting?" Darius took a deep breath. "We leverage the real estate, the stores, the land they sit on. We take out a hard money loan just for 6 months. We use that cash to buy the inventory, we flip it for a massive profit, and we pay off the loan before the first interest payment is even due." Reggie hesitated. He rubbed his chin. "I promised your mother I wouldn't touch the equity in the business anymore. That is our retirement, Darius. I know, Pops. And I wouldn't ask if I wasn't 100% sure. This is it. This is how we take King's Auto Parts to the next level. Imagine, Pops. We could open 10 more locations next year. We could franchise. You could finally retire in style. Buy that vacation home in Florida you always wanted." Darius watched his father's face. He saw the doubt warring with pride. Reggie wanted to believe. He wanted to believe that his son was a visionary. He wanted to believe that his sacrifice had been worth it. And more than anything, he wanted to prove that he was right to bet on Darius instead of me. "If I say no," Reggie asked. "Then we stay stagnant," Darius said, his voice dropping. "We let the competitors eat us alive. And honestly, Pops, I don't know if I can keep running a small-time operation. I have big ideas. If you don't trust me, maybe I should look for opportunities elsewhere." That was the dagger. The threat of abandonment. "No, no," Reggie said quickly, reaching for his reading glasses. "I trust you, son. You are the future of this family. You have the vision I never had." Darius pulled the papers out of his briefcase. He had already had them drawn up by a predatory lender, a shark who charged 20% interest and required the property deeds as collateral. "Just sign here, Pops. And here." Reggie didn't read the fine print. He didn't see the clause about immediate foreclosure in case of a single missed payment. He didn't see the exorbitant fees. He just saw his son looking at him with admiration. He signed his name, Reginald King. The signature was shaky but firm. "There," Darius said, snatching the papers back before his father could change his mind. "You won't regret this, Pops. We are going to be rich." Reggie smiled, leaning back in his chair. "I am already rich, son. I have a son like you. By the way, have you heard from your sister?" Darius's face hardened. "Nia. No, and good riddance. She is probably crying in a motel room somewhere. Let her learn the hard way, Pops. She needs to understand that in the real world, you have to earn your keep." Darius left the house with the deeds to the family empire in his briefcase. He didn't go back to the store to buy inventory. He went straight to the lender's office. The wire transfer hit the account 2 hours later. $300,000. Darius didn't pay the payroll, he didn't pay the vendors. He transferred $50,000 to Tiffany's account with the note yacht deposit. He transferred another $50,000 to his personal account for walking around money. And then, God help him, he opened the crypto app again. He saw a new coin, one that promised to recover all his losses. "This time, it will be different," he told himself. "This time I can't lose." He pressed the buy button. While he was gambling away my father's legacy, I was sitting in my office staring at a notification on my screen. My algorithm had flagged a new lien filing on the King's Auto Parts properties. I zoomed in on the document. I saw the lender's name, Shark Capital LLC, and I saw my father's signature. I leaned back in my chair and swiveled toward the window. The sun was setting over Atlanta, turning the sky a bruised purple. They had just walked into the trap. Darius had just handed me the keys. He thought he was buying a yacht, but he had just sold me his birthright. Sarah came into my office. "Ms. King, the preliminary paperwork for the debt acquisition is ready. Should we wait until morning?" "No," I said, keeping my eyes on the horizon. "Send it now." And Sarah, "Yes, Ms. King. Send a bottle of champagne to the Ansley Golf Club. Address it to Mr. Darius King." "A congratulations gift?" Sarah asked, confused. "No," I said, cold as ice. "A farewell gift. He just doesn't know it yet." I watched the city lights flicker on, one by one. The stage was set. The players were in position. My brother was drowning in greed, my sister-in-law was blinded by vanity, and my father was paralyzed by pride. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson in economics. The market does not care about your feelings. It does not care about your bloodline. It only cares about solvency. And the King family was officially insolvent. 2 weeks of silence followed the night I was evicted. 2 weeks of blissful, uninterrupted peace where I made another $4 million trading volatility on the European markets. But I knew the silence wasn't empty. It was the sound of a fuse burning down. My algorithms had been tracking the financial health of King's Auto Parts, and the data was painting a picture of absolute catastrophe. Darius had timed his entry into the crypto market with the precision of a man jumping off a cliff without a parachute. The coin he had dumped the payroll funds into had flatlined. It was worth zero. The $50,000 was gone, vanished into the digital ether. And now it was the middle of the month. Vendors were calling. The electricity bill for the main warehouse was overdue, and most terrifying of all for Darius' payroll was looming again in 48 hours. If he missed payroll, the employees wouldn't just quit, they would talk. Word would get back to my father, and the carefully constructed illusion of Darius the business genius would shatter. He was desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. But Darius was not just desperate, he was married to Tiffany. And Tiffany did not do desperate. She did predatory. I found out later through the grapevine that the idea was hers. They were sitting in their living room surrounded by leased furniture they couldn't afford. Darius was hyperventilating his head between his knees. Tiffany was drinking white wine and looking at her jewelry box, calculating what she might have to sell. She realized she would rather die than part with her diamonds, so she looked for a scapegoat. She thought of me. In Tiffany's mind, I was the perfect target. I drove a 10-year-old car. I wore clothes from Target. I never went on vacations. to a woman like her who measured worth in labels that meant I was hoarding money. She assumed I was sitting on a pile of unspent cash simply because I was too unrefined to know how to spend it. She convinced Darius that asking me for money wasn't begging, it was taking what was owed. After all, hadn't I lived rent-free in my parents' house for years? In her twisted logic, I owed the family, so I got the text message on a Tuesday morning. It was from Darius. "Hey sis, hate how things ended the other night. Let's grab coffee." My treat. We need to clear the air. I stared at the phone in my corner office. My treat. The irony was rich. He didn't have enough money in his account to buy a gumball, let alone coffee. I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a shakedown. A rational person would have blocked the number. But I was not feeling rational. I was feeling surgical. I wanted to see the desperation up close. I wanted to look him in the eye when he asked. So I replied. 2 p.m. The roasted bean on Lennox. I left my office at 1:30. I swapped my Italian silk blazer for a faded denim jacket. I took off my diamond studs. I drove the Honda Civic, which sounded like a lawnmower every time I accelerated. I needed to look the part. If they wanted the broke sister, they were going to get her. I walked into the coffee shop and spotted them immediately. They had chosen a table in the back, away from the window, presumably to hide their shame. Darius was wearing a suit that was too tight, straining at the buttons. He was sweating profusely, even though the air conditioning was blasting. His leg was bouncing up and down, shaking the entire table. Tiffany sat next to him, looking like she was ready for a photo shoot. She had on a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses indoors. She was typing furiously on her phone, probably deleting negative comments on her social media. I walked up to the table. Neither of them stood up. "Naya," Tiffany said, glancing up briefly. "You look tired. Are you sleeping well?" I sat down. "I am sleeping fine, Tiffany. What do you want?" Darius cleared his throat. He tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "Whoa, slow down, sis. Can't a brother just want to see his little sister?" We felt bad about Dad blowing up. You know how he is. Old school. He threw a plate at my head, Darius, I said, keeping my voice flat. "Yeah. Well, he was stressed," Darius said, dismissing the assault with a wave of his hand. "But that is why we are here. We want to help you get back on your feet." I folded my arms. "You want to help me?" "Exactly," Tiffany chimed in, putting her phone down. "We know you are struggling, Nia. We know you don't have a real career, and living out of your car, or wherever you are staying, must be hard. We want you to know we forgive you for the things you said. They forgave me." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. The delusion was breathtaking. "That is so big of you," I said. "Look," Darius said, leaning in, his eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. "I have been thinking. You are smart with numbers, right? You were always a math nerd. I have this incredible investment opportunity that just landed in my lap. It is a sure thing, guaranteed returns. But I have all my liquidity tied up in international shipping containers right now." International shipping containers. He was lying so badly, it was insulting. "So here's the deal." Darius continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to let you in on the ground floor. Because I love you. If you can scrape together, say, $50,000, I can flip that for you. I can turn it into $100,000 in a month. It would solve all your problems. You could get an apartment, get a better car." I stared at him. He wasn't asking for a loan. He was trying to scam me. He was trying to take the last few dollars he thought I had and feed them into the same furnace that had burned his payroll money. $50,000, I repeated slowly. "That is a lot of money, Darius. Where do you think I have $50,000? "Come on," Tiffany scoffed. "You have been working since you were 16 and you never spend a dime. You still wear those awful sneakers from college. We know you have a stash. Probably hidden under your mattress, knowing you." "So let me get this straight," I said, leaning forward. "You want me to give you my life savings, based on a promise that you will double it. Trust me, Darius said, sweating harder. I am doing this for you, Nia. I am giving you a chance to be part of the legacy. I looked at his shaking hands. I looked at the fear behind his eyes. He wasn't doing this for me. He was doing this because if he didn't come up with 50 grand by Friday, he was going to prison for embezzlement. I leaned back in my chair. No. The word hung in the air like a slap. What? Darius blinked. I said no, I replied calmly. I am not giving you $50,000. I am not giving you 50 cents. Darius's face turned red. You don't understand. This is a limited time offer. I understand perfectly, I said. You are broke, Darius. You are desperate. And you think I am stupid enough to bail you out. Tiffany gasped. How dare you? Your brother is a successful businessman. He is trying to help you. I turned my gaze to Tiffany. Successful? Is that why his credit card was declined for the appetizers at the gala last week? Is that why you are selling your designer purses on eBay under a fake name? Tiffany's mouth fell open. How did you... I know everything I said, but let's talk about debts. Darius, do you remember when we were in high school? You borrowed $20 from me to go to the movies with your friends because Dad had cut off your allowance. You swore you would pay me back the next day. Darius rolled his eyes. Are you serious? That was 15 years ago. It was $20. It was all the money I had, I said. I had saved it from mowing lawns, and when I asked for it back, you laughed at me. You told me that family doesn't keep score. You never paid me back, Darius. Not once in your life have you ever returned anything you took. So why would I believe you now with $50,000 when you couldn't even honor a $20 debt? Darius slammed his hand on the table. Because I am your brother. Because we are family. And that is when Tiffany decided to play her ace card. She reached out and grabbed my hand, her long fake nails digging into my skin. You listen to me, Nia, she hissed, her voice dropping the sweet facade completely. You people always talk about community. You talk about sticking together. Well, in my family, we help each other. When my brother needed money for rehab, my parents refinanced their house. That is what families do. They sacrifice. I pulled my hand away, as if she had burned me. You people, I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous octave. You know what I mean, Tiffany said, flushing slightly but doubling down. You are being selfish. You are sitting on a pile of cash, acting like a miser, while your brother is going through a temporary rough patch. It is disgusting. It is unchristian. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing the attention of the entire cafe. Let me tell you something about my selfishness, Tiffany, I said loud enough for the table next to us to hear. I worked double shifts while I was in college, so I wouldn't ask Dad for tuition. I drove this rusty car so Darius could have the new Mercedes. I stayed in the background so he could shine. I have sacrificed my entire life for this family's ego. I looked down at Darius, who was shrinking into his seat. And as for your culture lecture, Tiffany, I find it interesting that your version of family values involves taking money from the poor sister to fund your country club membership. If that is how your family operates, keep it. I want no part of it. I grabbed my purse. Nia, wait! Darius pleaded, desperation cracking his voice. Please. I am in trouble. Real trouble. I know, I said coldly. And you are going to be in a lot more trouble when Dad finds out what you did with the payroll accounts. Darius went pale. All the color drained from his face. He looked like a ghost. You wouldn't tell him, he whispered. It would kill him. I won't have to tell him, I said. The bank will tell him when they foreclose on the business. You have about 48 hours, Darius. I suggest you start updating your resume. Although I don't know who would hire a CEO who can't do basic math. I turned to walk away. You are a monster, Tiffany shrieked after me. A jealous, bitter little monster. I stopped at the counter on my way out. I looked at the barista who had watched the whole scene with wide eyes. The bill for table 4, I said, pointing to Darius and Tiffany. The barista nodded, checking the register. That will be $45. They ordered the premium tasting flight and 2 pastries. I laughed. Of course they did. I pulled out a $20 bill from my pocket, the only cash I had on me. Here, I said, handing it to the barista. Put this toward their bill. Tell my brother his debt from high school is finally paid in full. He can figure out the rest. I walked out of the coffee shop into the bright afternoon sun. I felt lighter. The final cord had been cut. I had given Darius a chance to be honest, to ask for help with humility. Instead, he had tried to hustle me. He had made his choice. Now he had to live with the consequences. I got into my Honda Civic and started the engine. It sputtered and coughed before roaring to life. I patted the dashboard. Don't worry, old girl, I whispered. You won't have to do this much longer. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my real estate broker. Ms. King, the bank has officially listed the King's Auto Parts portfolio as distressed. They are accepting bids on the debt starting tomorrow morning. I smiled. Darius needed $50,000 to survive the week. I was about to spend $2.4 million to bury him. I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving my brother and his wife to fight over who was going to pay the remaining $25 for a coffee date that had just cost them their entire future. The audacity of their ask was stunning, but the brutality of my answer was just beginning. They wanted to play hardball fine. I brought a bat. The coffee shop meeting had been a test, and Darius had failed it spectacularly. But I knew my brother. I knew that when a cornered animal sees no way out, it does not surrender. It bites. And since I had refused to be his victim, he turned his teeth toward the only other source of equity he had left. Our parents. 48 hours after I left him at the cafe, Darius drove to my parents' house in Cascade Heights. I watched on the security feed as he let himself in with his key. The house was empty. Mom was at her Bible study group and Dad was at the laundromat trying to fix a broken dryer to save $100 on a repairman. Darius went straight to my father's study. This room was sacred ground. It was where my father kept his awards from the Chamber of Commerce and his framed photos of the day he opened his first store. It was also where he kept the family safe. I watched Darius kneel in front of the heavy oak desk. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped his keys twice. He wasn't looking for cash. He knew there was no cash. He was looking for the deed. The house had been paid off for 10 years. It was the one asset my father had protected fiercely. He used to tell us that no matter what happened in the world, as long as we owned dirt, we were somebody. That deed represented 40 years of sweating over steam presses and dealing with difficult customers. It was his legacy, and Darius found it tucked inside a leather binder behind a row of encyclopedias. He pulled out the document. It was yellowed with age. He took a picture of it with his phone. Then he pulled out a loan application he had brought with him. It was from a company called Quick Capital Solutions. I knew them. They were hard money lenders sharks who charged 25% interest and required zero credit checks because they secured everything against real estate. If you missed a payment, they didn't call you. They took your house. Darius placed the application on the desk. He pulled a pen from his pocket. He took a deep breath, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Then he did the unthinkable. He signed my father's name, Reginald King. He practiced it a few times on a scrap piece of paper, first mimicking the loop of the R and the sharp slant of the K. When he felt confident, he put the pen to the official document. He signed away his father's safety. He signed away his mother's peace of mind. I watched him do it from my office across town. A cold fury settled in my stomach. This was fraud. This was elder abuse. I could have called the police right then. I could have sent a squad car to arrest him before the ink was dry. But I didn't, because an arrest would only make my father bail him out. My father would mortgage the house to pay for Darius's legal defense. He would say it was a misunderstanding. To truly break this cycle, I had to let the poison run its course. I had to let them feel the sickness so they would finally accept the cure. Darius left the house with the forged documents. He drove straight to a strip mall on the outskirts of town where Quick Capital had their office. He walked out an hour later with a cashier's check for $100,000. That evening, he went home to Tiffany. I don't have cameras in their apartment, but I didn't need them. I saw the transaction history later. I saw the text messages recovered during the discovery phase of the lawsuit. Darius told her everything. He told her he forged the signature. He told her he put his parents' house on the line. He was hyperventilating, terrified of what he had done. And Tiffany's response was chilling. She was painting her toenails when he confessed. She didn't scream. She didn't tell him to take the money back. She simply looked at him and said, "As long as this doesn't affect my credit score or my ability to use the Amex, I don't care how you fix it, just fix it." She was an accomplice not out of loyalty, but out of indifference. She viewed my parents' house as a resource to be harvested. If burning it down kept her warm, she would hand Darius the matches. With the fresh infusion of cash, Darius felt invincible again. The panic of the morning was replaced by the manic optimism of the gambler. He didn't pay the vendors. He didn't pay the past due payroll taxes. He took the entire $100,000 and dumped it into a leverage trade on a volatile tech stock that a guru on Twitter said was going to the moon. For 2 days, the stock went up. Darius was euphoric. He was texting Dad, telling him that business was turning around, that he had made some strategic moves. Dad was so proud. He told Mom that he knew Darius had the magic touch. Then the market corrected. It wasn't a slow decline, it was a crash. The tech sector took a nosedive on Friday morning following a grim inflation report. Because Darius was trading on leverage, he didn't just lose the money he invested, he got margin called. The brokerage liquidated his position instantly. By noon on Friday, the $100,000 was gone. All of it. Darius sat in his office at the auto parts store staring at the screen. He had committed a felony to get that money. He had risked the roof over his parents' heads, and he had torched it in less than 72 hours. The fallout began this following week. Quick Capital Solutions was not a bank. They didn't wait 30 days for a payment. Their contract stated that the first payment was due immediately upon funding a processing fee, they called it. Darius didn't have it, so they sent the letter. It arrived at my parents' house on a sunny Tuesday. My father walked out to the mailbox humming a gospel tune. He was feeling good. Darius had told him things were looking up. He grabbed the stack of mail, a few bills, a flyer for a pizza place, and a thick envelope marked urgent, personal, and confidential. He opened it right there on the driveway. I wasn't watching the camera at that exact moment, but I saw the aftermath. I saw him walk back into the house. He wasn't humming anymore. He was walking slowly, like a man wading through deep water. He went into the kitchen where my mother was chopping vegetables. He sat down heavily at the table. He didn't say a word. He just laid the letter down. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. My mother wiped her hands on her apron. "What is this, Reggie? Is this another bill for the shop?" My father couldn't speak. He pointed at the second paragraph, the one that listed the borrower as Reginald King and the collateral as the primary residence. "I never signed this," he whispered. His voice was trembling. "I never borrowed money against the house, Viola. I swore to you, I would never touch the house." My mother picked up the paper. Her hands started to shake. "But it has your signature right here, Reggie. Look." My father put on his reading glasses. He stared at the signature. It looked like his. But he knew. Deep in his gut, he knew. He hadn't been to a loan office in years. "Someone stole my identity," he said. His face was turning gray. "A thief. Someone is trying to take our home." He grabbed the phone and dialed the number on the letterhead. He was shouting now, panic rising in his chest. "Hello, this is Reginald King. I just got a letter from you people. There is a mistake. I never signed a loan with you. You are fraudsters." I could hear the voice on the other end of the line. It was a woman, calm and professional. "Mr. King, we have a notarized contract and a copy of your driver's license on file. The funds were wired to an account ending in 4092. My father froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking ashen and old. 4092. That wasn't his account. That was the business operating account. The account that Darius controlled. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the table. He didn't hang up. He just stared at the wall. The realization hit him harder than a physical blow. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a hacker from halfway across the world. It was his son, the golden child, the boy he had put on a pedestal while he kicked me out into the rain. Reggie, my mother asked, terrified by his silence. Reggie, what is it? Call him, my father rasped. He clutched his chest, his other hand gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Call Darius. Tell him to get here. Now. Darius arrived 20 minutes later. He walked in with a swagger that looked forced. He was wearing sunglasses indoors, probably to hide the red rims of his eyes. Hey, Pops. Mom said you needed me urgently. What is going on? Is it the water heater again? My father didn't look up. He slid the letter across the table. Darius looked at it. He didn't gasp. He didn't look surprised. He just sighed a long, annoyed sound, as if this was a minor inconvenience. Oh, this, he said, scratching the back of his neck. Yeah, I meant to talk to you about this. You meant to talk to me? My father asked, his voice barely a whisper. About forging my signature. About mortgaging my house. Darius sat down uninvited. He leaned back in the chair, crossing his legs. Look, Pops don't use words like forge. That is harsh. I was acting as your proxy. I needed to move fast. It was a liquidity issue. A liquidity issue, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You stole my house, Darius. You stole the roof over your mother's head. Where is the money? Where is the $100,000? Darius looked away. He picked at a loose thread on his pants. The market is volatile, Pops. You know how it is. There were some headwinds. The Fed raised rates and the tech sector took a hit. It is a paper loss. It will bounce back. A paper loss? My father stood up. He was swaying on his feet. The veins in his neck were bulging. I don't care about the market. I care that you lied to me. I care that you looked me in the eye and told me business was good while you were robbing me blind. Darius stood up, too defensive now. I was trying to save the business. I did this for you. If I didn't get that cash, the vendors were going to cut us off. Would you prefer that? Would you prefer we declare bankruptcy? I would prefer honesty, my father screamed. I would prefer a son who doesn't treat me like a mark. Stop it, Tiffany yelled, walking through the door. She had followed Darius, knowing this confrontation was coming. She stood next to her husband, crossing her arms. Stop yelling at him, Reggie. He is under a lot of pressure. He made a business decision. It didn't work out. That happens. That is capitalism. My father looked at Tiffany, then at Darius. He looked at them as if he was seeing them for the first time. He saw the arrogance. He saw the lack of remorse. He saw two people who believed they were entitled to consume everything he had built. Get out, my father said. Darius rolled his eyes. Come on, Pops, don't be dramatic. We can fix this. I just need you to sign a loan modification. Get out, my father roared. His voice cracked and he grabbed his chest again. He stumbled back, collapsing into his chair. His breath was coming in short gasps. Reggie! My mother screamed, rushing to his side. Darius didn't move to help. He just stood there, looking annoyed that his father was making a scene. You are overreacting, Pops, Darius muttered. It is just money. My mother turned to Darius, her eyes filled with tears. Get out, Darius. Can't you see you are killing him? Go! Darius threw his hands up. Fine. Be that way. I try to save the empire, and this is the thanks I get. Come on, Tiffany. Let's go somewhere where we are appreciated. They walked out, leaving my father gasping for air and my mother sobbing over the foreclosure notice. I watched it all on the screen. My hand hovered over the phone, ready to call 911. But my father's breathing stabilized. He took a pill from his pocket. He sat there broken. The trap had sprung. They were caught in the steel jaws of their own greed. I picked up my office phone. Sarah, get me the legal department. The default notice has been served. It is time to execute the buyout. I wasn't doing this to save them. Not yet. I was doing this to own them. Darius thought he could blame the market. He was about to find out that I was the market, and I was coming to collect. The invitation arrived via text message from my mother on a Thursday afternoon. It was simple and suspicious. Dinner at 7. Your father wants to make amends. Please come home. We are making oxtails. I stared at the screen in my office. Oxtails. That was the nuclear option. My mother only made her signature braised oxtails with butter beans on Christmas or when someone had died. It was a labor of love that took 6 hours of slow cooking. Using it as bait for a casual Thursday dinner meant they were desperate. They were pulling out the big guns of culinary manipulation to lure me back into the kill zone. A part of me wanted to ignore it. I had the upper hand. I was days away from buying their debt and owning their world. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I wanted to see them squirm. I wanted to see what a family looks like when they are drowning and trying to decide which member to use as a raft. I arrived at 7 o'clock sharp. I parked my Honda Civic in the driveway next to Darius's Mercedes, which I noticed had a layer of dust on it. He probably couldn't afford the car wash anymore. The moment I stepped inside the house, the smell hit me. Rich, savory beef, onions, garlic, and thyme. It smelled like my childhood. It smelled like safety. But as I walked into the dining room, I realized the atmosphere was anything but safe. The table was set with the good china. Not the everyday plates, but the gold-rimmed Lenox set that was strictly forbidden to touch. Candles were lit. My father sat at the head of the table wearing a fresh shirt and a tie. Darius was on his right, looking surprisingly sober and shaved. Tiffany was there too, wearing a modest dress instead of her usual flashy attire. My mother was hovering by the kitchen door, wiping her hands on her apron, looking anxious. Nia. My father stood up. He actually stood up. He walked over to me, and for the first time in 10 years, he hugged me. It was a stiff, awkward embrace, like hugging a statue, but it was a hug. I am glad you came, daughter, he said. His voice was thick with emotion. Too thick. It sounded rehearsed. I sat down in my usual seat, the seat that usually faced the wall. But tonight the chair had been moved slightly, so I was part of the circle. My mother brought out the serving platter. The oxtails were falling off the bone, glistening in dark gravy. She placed a heaping spoonful on my plate. Then my father did something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He reached over, took the biggest, meatiest piece from the platter, and placed it on my plate. Eat up, he said, smiling. You look thin, Nia. You need your strength. I looked around the table. Darius was smiling at me. Tiffany was smiling at me. It was like stepping into an episode of The Twilight Zone. This was the love bombing phase. I knew it. In the corporate world, this is what happens right before a hostile merger. They wine and dine you before they gut your department. So I ate. I let them play their little game. The conversation was excruciatingly polite. Tiffany complimented my hair, which she had called a rat's nest 2 weeks ago. Darius asked me about the weather. My father told a story about when I was 5 years old and won a spelling bee. He had never mentioned that story before. In fact, he had missed that spelling bee to go to one of Darius's baseball games. Finally, as the plates were cleared and the peach cobbler was served, my father cleared his throat. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The signal. Nia. He began clasping his hands on the table. I have been doing a lot of thinking since our disagreement. I realize that I have been too hard on you. I have put a lot of pressure on this family to succeed, and sometimes I lose sight of what matters. He paused, looking at Darius, who nodded solemnly. We are a family, my father continued. And families stick together. We support each other. I know I said some hurtful things. I was stressed. The business, the economy, it gets to a man. But I want to make it right. I want to bring you back into the fold. He reached under the table and pulled out a leather folder. I want to secure your future, Nia. I want you to be part of the legacy. Darius and I have been working on a restructuring plan for the company. We are expanding. We are going to diversify. And we want you to be a partner. I put down my fork. A partner, I asked. Since when do you want a partner who drives a Honda? My father laughed a forced, hearty chuckle. Oh, that doesn't matter. What matters is trust. We want to show you that we trust you. Darius slid the folder across the table toward me. It was open to a page full of dense legal text. It is just a formality, Darius said, his voice casual. A standard restructuring agreement. Since you are going to be part of the family trust, we just need your signature to consolidate some of the old accounts. It basically just says you are a beneficiary, Tiffany chimed in. It is really a great opportunity, Nia. Reggie is being so generous. He is giving you equity. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at them. Their eyes were locked on me. They were holding their breath. They looked like wolves waiting for the lamb to wander into the trap. I pulled a pair of reading glasses from my purse. Not the cheap drugstore ones they were used to seeing, but my Cartier frames. I saw Tiffany's eyes widen slightly as she recognized the brand, but she stayed silent. I began to read. I didn't just skim the lines. I read the clauses. I read the definitions. My brain shifted instantly from daughter mode to CEO mode. This wasn't a beneficiary agreement. This was a nightmare. It was a guarantor contract. But not just any contract. It was a cross-collateralization agreement for a distressed asset loan. I scanned the numbers. The principal amount was $2 million. The interest rate was 18% variable. And the collateral. It listed the borrower as King's Auto Parts and the CO borrower as Nia King. But here was the kicker. The text in the fine print on page 3 stated that the CO borrower accepted full personal liability for the debt in the event of default. It also granted the lender power of attorney to liquidate the CO borrower's personal assets to satisfy the balance. They weren't giving me equity. They were trying to transfer their debt to me. They must have run a background check. They must have found out I had good credit. They didn't know I was a millionaire, but they knew I had a clean record. They wanted to use my credit score as a fresh host for their parasitic financial habits. They wanted to saddle me with $2 million of toxic debt so they could wash their hands of it. I looked up. My father was smiling, expecting me to be grateful. Darius was sweating. Just sign right there at the bottom, Darius said, pointing to the line with a trembling finger. We can get it notarized tomorrow. I closed the folder. The sound echoed in the silent room. I looked at my father. You want me to sign this? Yes, honey, my father said. It is for the family. I looked at Darius. You read this? Of course, Darius lied. It is standard boilerplate. I laughed. It started as a chuckle, and then it grew. I laughed until my chest hurt. I laughed because the audacity was so staggering it was almost impressive. What is so funny? Tiffany snapped, dropping the nice act. I opened the folder again and slammed my hand down on page 3. Standard boilerplate. I asked, my voice cutting through the room like a razor. This is a death warrant. I looked at my father. Do you know what an unconditional personal guarantee is, Dad? My father looked confused. It means you are part of the team. No, I said. It means that when Darius inevitably crashes this company into the ground again, which he will do in about 3 months, the bank doesn't come after him. They don't come after the business. They come after me. I stood up, picking up the document and shaking it in front of their faces. This contract says that I agree to take on $2 million of debt. It says that I agree to pay 18% interest. That is $360,000 a year in interest alone. You are trying to trick me into becoming the bag holder for your failure. Darius stood up, knocking his chair back. You are reading it wrong. You don't understand finance. I don't understand finance. I stared at him with cold amusement. Darius the First trade, more volume in a single hour before breakfast than this entire family has earned in 3 generations. I know exactly what this is. This is a desperate attempt to use my credit rating to plug a hole on a sinking ship. My father stood up, his face turning red again. The nice facade was crumbling. Nia, we are drowning. We need this loan to save the house, to save the store. If you don't sign this, we lose everything. Then lose it, I shouted back. Lose it all. Why is that my problem? You told me to live in the streets, remember? You told me I was nothing, and now that you need a lifeline, you invite me over here, feed me oxtails, and try to trick me into signing my life away. I looked at my mother. She was crying silently into her napkin. Did you know about this? Mom, I asked. She looked down. Your father said it was the only way. The only way, I repeated. The only way was to sacrifice me. Again. I ripped the contract in half. Then I ripped it again. I threw the confetti of paper onto the table right into the bowl of peach cobbler. There is your signature, I said. My father looked at the torn paper like I had just murdered a child. You ungrateful wretch, he whispered. I tried to be nice. I tried to give you a chance. A chance to what? To be your slave. To pay for Darius's mistakes for the rest of my life. I grabbed my purse. Let me make something very clear to all of you. I said, my voice steady and low. I will never sign anything for this family. Not a loan, not a check, not a get-well card. You made your bed. Now you are going to sleep in it. And I suggest you get comfortable because the mattress is about to be repossessed. Tiffany stood up, her eyes blazing. You think you are so smart, but you are just a bitter, lonely woman. You will regret this when you are all alone. I am not alone, Tiffany, I said, walking to the door. And I am definitely not broke. I stopped at the doorway and looked back at them, the tableau of a family destroyed by their own greed. Enjoy the oxtails, I said. It is probably the last expensive meal you will be eating for a very long time. I walked out of the house. I didn't look back. I got into my Honda and drove away. My hands were shaking not from fear but from adrenaline. They had tried to bury me. They had tried to trap me. But all they had done was confirm what I already knew. There was no saving them. There was only the takeover. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. It is Nia. Execute the purchase agreement for the King's Auto Parts debt. Don't wait until morning. Do it tonight. And add a clause. I want immediate possession of the commercial properties upon default. No grace period. They wanted a signature fine. They were about to get one. They were about to get my signature on the eviction notice for their entire lives. The dinner was over. Now it was time for the slaughter. The sound of the front door latch clicking open was the trigger. I had my hand on the brass handle, ready to leave the toxicity of my childhood home behind forever, when the explosion finally happened. It wasn't my father who detonated first. It was Tiffany. The facade of the sweet sister-in-law evaporated instantly. The mask of Southern belle politeness she had worn all evening melted away to reveal the snarling, desperate creature underneath. She didn't just stand up, she launched herself from the chair, knocking over her wineglass. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like a fresh wound spreading toward the center of the table, but she didn't even look at it. Her eyes were fixed on me, and they were filled with a hatred so pure it was almost blinding. You ungrateful little wretch, Tiffany screamed. Her voice cracked, losing all its practiced elegance. You think you are better than us, don't you? You think because you hoard your little pennies and drive that piece of junk car that you are morally superior? I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. I let her words hang in the air, letting them expose her character to the room. You are nothing, she shrieked. You are a 32-year-old spinster with no husband, no children, and no life. That is why you are so bitter, Nia. You are jealous. You are jealous that Darius has a wife who loves him. You are jealous that we have a life while you go home to an empty apartment. You are useless to this family. The only thing you are good for is your credit score, and you are too selfish to even share that. I turned slowly. My face was impassive. I looked at Tiffany, who was shaking with rage, her chest heaving. Is that all? I asked quietly. No, that is not all, she spat. You should be begging us to let you sign that paper. It is the only way you will ever be relevant. When we are rich again, when Darius turns this company around, we will remember this. We will remember that you turned your back on us. You will die alone, Nia, surrounded by your cats and your mediocrity. I looked at Darius, expecting him to defend me, expecting him to tell his wife to stop insulting his sister. But Darius wasn't looking at me with brotherly affection. He was looking at me like I was the thief. He was looking at me like I was the one who had stolen the payroll money. He stood up. His face was a mask of red fury. The veins in his neck were bulging, pulsing with the pressure of his own failures. He wasn't seeing his little sister anymore. He was seeing an obstacle. He was seeing the only thing standing between him and a prison sentence. You think this is funny? Darius roared, stepping around the table. He clenched his fists. You think you can just walk in here, eat our food, and laugh at us? He took a step toward me, then another. His body language was unmistakable. He was posturing for violence. It was the stance of a weak man who had run out of words. Darius, don't. My mother whimpered from the corner, but she didn't move. She stayed rooted to her spot, paralyzed by her own passivity. Darius didn't listen. He lunged. He moved fast, closing the distance between us in 2 strides. He raised his hand, not in a fist, but open, ready to grab me, to shake me, to force me into submission. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood my ground, my eyes locking onto his. Touch me, I said, my voice low and lethal. Touch me, Darius, and I will have you arrested for assault before you can blink. And considering your current legal situation with the bank fraud, I don't think you want to add a violent felony to your record. He froze. His hand hovered inches from my shoulder. He was breathing hard, smelling of sweat and fear. He looked into my eyes and saw something he hadn't expected. He didn't see fear. He saw a predator. He saw someone who was not afraid to destroy him. He lowered his hand slowly, his fingers curling into an impotent fist. He backed away, spitting on the floor near my shoes. Get out, he growled. You are dead to me. You hear me? You are not my sister. I looked past him to the head of the table. My father was still sitting there. He hadn't moved. He hadn't stood up to protect his daughter from his son's aggression. He hadn't scolded Tiffany for her vile insults. He was just sitting there staring at the ruins of his dinner. Dad, I asked, are you going to let them speak to me like that? My father looked up. His eyes were cold, hard stones. There was no love in them. There was only the calculation of a businessman who had lost a deal. You heard your brother, my father said. His voice was steady, devoid of emotion. If you walk out that door today without signing that contract, do not come back. Do not call us. Do not visit. You are no longer a king. He picked up his napkin and wiped his mouth, dismissing me as if I were a waitress who had brought the wrong order. I disown you, Nia. You are a cancer to this family. Go live your selfish life, but know this. When you fail, and you will fail because you have no loyalty, do not come crawling back to me. I will not open the door. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, counting down the seconds of my former life. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It was relief. The final shackle had been broken. They had set me free. I straightened my blazer. I brushed an imaginary speck of dust from my lapel. Understood, I said. My voice was clear, carrying through the room. I accept your terms. I looked at Tiffany. You are right about one thing, Tiffany. I am alone, but I would rather be alone than be surrounded by parasites. I looked at Darius. And you are right too, Darius. I am not your sister. A sister would enable you. A stranger lets you face the consequences of your actions. I looked at my father. And you, Dad. You talk about loyalty. But loyalty is a two-way street. You want me to set myself on fire to keep you warm. That is not loyalty. That is a sacrifice. And I am done bleeding on your altar. I turned to the door. One last thing I said over my shoulder. You said that when I fail, I shouldn't come crawling back. I want you to remember that specific instruction, because the tables turn very quickly in this world. And when you are the ones drowning, when the water is over your head and you are gasping for air, do not call my name. Get out! My father screamed, throwing his wineglass at the wall. It shattered, leaving a red stain that looked like blood. I opened the door and walked out into the night. The cool air hit my face, drying the sweat I hadn't realized was there. I walked down the driveway past the manicured lawn my father was so proud of, past the flower beds my mother tended to, past the mailbox that contained the foreclosure notice they were trying to hide. I reached my Honda Civic. I didn't get in. Instead, I walked past it. I walked to the corner of the block where the streetlights ended and the shadows began. A long black shape was waiting there. The Maybach. My driver Marcus saw me coming. He stepped out immediately, opening the rear door. "Ms. King," he said. "Ready to go home?" "Not yet." "Marcus," I said, sliding into the leather interior. I pulled out my secure phone. The screen cast a blue glow on my face. I dialed a number. It was a direct line. It rang once. "Yes, Ms. King." The voice of my lead counsel came through crisp and alert, despite the late hour. "Activate Project Phoenix," I said. There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure, Ms. King? Once we execute the purchase agreement, there is no going back. We will own the primary note on the commercial properties and the secondary lien on the residence. It is a hostile action." I looked out the window at the house down the street. I could see the silhouette of my father pacing in the dining room. I could see Darius waving his arms, probably blaming me for everything. "I am sure," I said. My voice was ice. "Buy it all. The laundromats, the auto parts store, and the house, especially the house." "Understood. We are initiating the wire transfer now. We should have clear title by tomorrow morning. Do you want us to notify the debtors immediately?" "No," I said. "Let them sleep on it. Let them think they have time. Serve them the papers on Monday morning. I want them to have a weekend to think about their victory." "And Ms. King?" the lawyer asked. "Regarding the foreclosure timeline, do we want to offer a forbearance plan? Usually, with family members, clients prefer to offer a grace period." I closed my eyes for a second, remembering the way Darius had lunged at me, remembering the way my father had looked at me with dead eyes. "No forbearance," I said. "Default is immediate. If they miss a single payment, which we know they will, I want immediate possession. Start drafting the eviction notices for the commercial units, and prepare a lease agreement for the residential property." "A lease agreement?" "Yes, I am not kicking them out of the house. Not yet. I want them to pay rent. I want them to write a check to me every single month. I want them to see my name on the deposit slip." "Understood, Ms. King. Consider it done." I hung up the phone. I leaned back in the seat. "Drive Marcus," I said. "Where to, Ms. King?" "Take me to the office. I have work to do. I just acquired a new portfolio and I need to restructure the management team." As the car pulled away, leaving the suburbs behind, I didn't feel sad. I felt powerful. They had declared war on me, thinking I was an unarmed civilian. They didn't know I was the arms dealer. My father had said he disowned me. He had cut me out of the family. He didn't realize that by doing so, he had just cut himself out of his only safety net. He was falling now. They all were, and the ground was coming up fast. Project Phoenix was live. The bird wasn't rising from the ashes to bring hope. It was rising to burn everything down so something new could be built. Something mine. The war was over. I had already won. They just didn't know they were dead yet. By the time Marcus pulled the Maybach up to the service entrance of the Sovereign Tower, it was nearly midnight. Most of the city was asleep, but the financial markets never sleep. Money is an insomniac. It moves around the globe, chasing the sun from New York to Tokyo to London, and tonight it was going to stop right here in Atlanta. I walked into the lobby, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished granite. The night security guard nodded at me. He was used to seeing me at odd hours. He knew that while other people were dreaming, I was building. I took the private elevator straight to the 45th level. The office was dark, save for the ambient glow of the city lights and the blinking LEDs of the server racks in the climate-controlled room down the hall. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I preferred the dark. It helped me focus. I sat down at my desk and woke up my monitors. 6 screens flickered to life, bathing my face in a cool blue light. I wasn't Nia, the rejected daughter, anymore. I was the algorithm. I was the predator. I opened a secure, encrypted folder labeled Phoenix Holdings. This was my shell company, a legal entity registered in Delaware with a mailing address in the Cayman Islands. It was a ghost. It had no employees, no office, and no face. It existed for one purpose only: to acquire assets anonymously. To the outside world, Phoenix Holdings was just another faceless investment firm looking for high-yield distress opportunities. To me, it was the sword of justice. I pulled up the debt profile of King's Auto Parts. The numbers were catastrophic. My father owed $1.2 million to the regional bank for the commercial mortgage, and Darius owed another $100,000 to the hard money sharks at Quick Capital. Plus, there were vendor liens and tax holds. The total liability was close to $2 million. To a normal person, $2 million of debt looks like a tragedy. To a bank, it looks like toxic waste. Banks hate bad loans. They destroy their balance sheets. They lower their credit ratings. When a loan goes into default, like my father's had, a bank officer looks at it and sees a headache that is going to cost them years of legal fees to resolve. They just want it gone. They want to scrub it from their books so they can tell their shareholders that their portfolio is clean. That is where I come in. I typed in a command to initiate a purchase order for the debt. My algorithm had already calculated the risk-adjusted value. Because the loan was non-performing, because the business was failing, and because the real estate market was softening, I didn't have to pay full price. I wasn't going to pay $2 million for $2 million of debt. That would be bad business. I sent a digital offer to the bank's distressed asset division. I offered them 60 cents on the dollar. I offered to pay them $1.2 million cash immediately to take the entire mess off their hands. I watched the cursor blink. In a normal negotiation, this would take weeks. But I knew this bank. I knew their quarterly report was due in 2 days. They were desperate to dump bad assets before the deadline. Minutes later, the confirmation came through. Offer accepted. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just felt a cold satisfaction. With a single keystroke, I had bought my father's life's work for a 40% discount. I had saved $800,000 simply by being smarter than him. Next was Quick Capital, the sharks. Dealing with them was even easier. They were predatory lenders who operated on volume. They didn't want to go to court. They wanted cash. I offered them 80 cents on the dollar for the loan Darius had forged. They accepted in 30 seconds. They were probably thrilled to get their principal back without having to hire a lawyer. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers steepled. It was done. Technically, I now owned the ground my father walked on. I owned the roof over his head. I owned the steam presses in his laundromats. I owned the shelves in the auto parts store. If he wanted to flush a toilet in his house, he was doing it with my permission. A wave of exhaustion hit me, but it wasn't accompanied by guilt. People often ask how business owners can be so ruthless with family. They assume that blood should stop the bleeding. But my father was the one who taught me this lesson. He was the one who told me when I was 12 years old and couldn't sell enough candy bars for the school fundraiser that results are the only thing that matters. He told me that the world doesn't care about effort. It cares about closing the deal. Tonight I closed the deal. I was honoring his teachings. I was giving him the ultimate masterclass in capitalism. He had leveraged his assets poorly. He had chosen incompetent management in Darius. He had ignored market signals. In the wild, the weak animal is eaten by the strong. I was simply the apex predator cleaning up the ecosystem. While I was finalizing the wire transfers across town, inside the house that was no longer theirs, the King family was celebrating their own delusion. I checked the social media feeds. Tiffany had posted a story on Instagram just 20 minutes ago. It was a video of her and Darius clinking wine glasses. The caption read "Family First," blocking out the negativity. I zoomed in on the video. They were in the living room. My father was sitting in his armchair looking relieved. They were laughing. They actually thought they had won. In their minds, my refusal to sign the contract was just a setback. They convinced themselves that the bank would be slow to act. They believed the myth that foreclosure takes years. They thought they could sweet-talk the loan officer on Monday morning, ask for an extension, maybe pay a few $1,000s as a good faith gesture, and kick the can down the road. They relied on the system being inefficient. They didn't know the system had been bypassed. They didn't know that Phoenix Holdings didn't have a customer service department. They didn't know there was no one to sweet-talk. I switched to Tiffany's browser history, which I could access because she was still using the family cloud account I had set up 5 years ago. She was on Expedia. She was looking at flights to Paris, business class. $4,000 a ticket. I shook my head in disbelief. They were facing financial ruin. They had just tried to trap a family member into $2 million of debt. And their reaction to the crisis was to plan a vacation. "I need a mental health break," Tiffany had texted her best friend. The drama with Nia was so draining. "Darius and I are going to Paris to reconnect. We will figure out the business stuff when we get back." The disconnect from reality was pathological. Tiffany believed that she was entitled to luxury regardless of her balance sheet. She viewed money not as a finite resource, but as a right. She thought that because she was a king, because she was beautiful, because she was white, that the universe would simply provide. She thought the rules of math didn't apply to her. Darius was no better. I pulled up his texts to his fraternity brothers. "Just had to cut off my toxic sister," he wrote. "She was dead weight. Now I can finally focus on taking the company public. Watch this space. Big things coming, taking the company public." He couldn't even keep the lights on and he was talking about an IPO. It was tragic. It was like watching a child play pilot in a cardboard box while the house burned down around him. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. The wire transfers were complete. The digital certificates of ownership were now sitting in my secure server. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer again. "It is done," I said. "Phoenix Holdings owns the paper." "Excellent, Ms. King," the lawyer replied. "We will file the transfer of lien with the county clerk first thing in the morning. Since it is Friday, the paperwork will be recorded by noon. Do you want us to send the notification letters then?" "No," I said. "Let them have their weekend. Let Tiffany book her tickets to Paris. Let Darius play big shot for 2 more days. I want the crash to be maximum impact." So Monday morning I confirmed, but I want a specific courier, send a process server, a big one, someone intimidating. And I want the papers served at the store, not the house. I want Darius to be served in front of his employees, and the parents serve them at the house. But time it so it happens simultaneously. I don't want them calling each other to warn them. I want the shock to hit them all at the exact same second. Understood. It will be coordinated. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city. Somewhere out there in the sprawling suburbs, my family was sleeping soundly. They were dreaming of yachts in Paris and a future where they were still the royalty of Atlanta. They didn't know that the castle had already been sold. They didn't know that the ground they were sleeping on belonged to the daughter they had thrown away. I placed my hand on the cold glass. "Sleep tight, Dad," I whispered. "Enjoy the bed. It is going to cost you $3,000 a month starting Monday." I turned off the monitors, leaving the office in darkness. I walked out to the elevator, feeling lighter than I had in years. The victimhood was gone. The hurt little girl was gone. In her place was a landlord, and tenants who don't pay get evicted. That isn't cruelty. That is just business. 3 weeks passed in what my family assumed was a victory lap, because the bank hadn't called the very next day, and because no sheriff had kicked down the door within 48 hours. They convinced themselves that they had won the standoff. They mistook the silence of the legal system for incompetence. They didn't know that in the world of high finance, silence is not empty space. Silence is the sound of the blade being sharpened. During those 21 days, I watched them return to their arrogant baseline. Darius posted photos of himself test driving a new Porsche he had no intention of buying. Tiffany bought a new wardrobe for her Paris trip, putting it all on a credit card she had opened in her maiden name. My father went back to lecturing his friends at the barbershop about how to run a tight ship. They were sleepwalking toward the edge of a cliff, and I was the one controlling gravity. The drop happened on a Monday morning. I had arranged for a private process server named Big Tony to handle the delivery. Tony was 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and indifference. He didn't care about sob stories. He got paid to deliver bad news, and he was very good at his job. At 9 o'clock sharp, Tony pulled his unmarked van up to the curb in front of King's Auto Parts. Inside the store, Darius was standing behind the counter holding a cup of coffee and berating a teenage employee about stacking the oil filters incorrectly. "I have big plans for this place," Darius was saying, his voice booming with unearned authority. "We are going to modernize. We are going to have digital kiosks. You need to step up your game if you want to be part of the future." The future arrived 3 seconds later when Tony walked through the glass doors. He didn't browse. He walked straight up to the counter, pulling a roll of bright orange tape and a staple gun from his belt. Darius frowned. "Can I help you, sir? The loading dock is in the back if you are making a delivery." Tony didn't answer. He slapped a thick packet of legal documents onto the counter right next to Darius's coffee. Then he turned around and walked to the front window. "Hey," Darius shouted, coming out from behind the counter. "You can't just leave that there." "What is this?" Tony ignored him. He taped a large neon notice to the inside of the glass door. The sound of the tape ripping was loud and violent in the quiet store. "Closed by order of creditor. Property seized. No trespassing." Darius ran to the door. "What are you doing? You can't put that there. This is a place of business." Tony turned around and looked down at Darius. "Not anymore, it isn't. You have been served. You have 1 hour to collect your personal effects and vacate the premises. The locks are being changed at 10. Darius laughed a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You are crazy. My father owns this building. Call the police." Tony pointed to the document on the counter. "Read the paperwork, kid. Your father doesn't own a brick in this wall. NK Holdings owns it. And NK Holdings wants you out." At the exact same moment across town, another member of Tony's team was walking up the driveway of my parents' house in Cascade Heights. My mother was on the porch watering her hydrangeas, humming a hymn. My father was inside watching the morning news. The server didn't ring the doorbell. He used a staple gun to attach the eviction notice directly to the beautiful mahogany front door my father refinished every summer. Thwack, thwack, thwack. My mother dropped her watering can. Water spilled over her shoes. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice trembling. "What are you doing to our door?" The man handed her a matching packet. "Mrs. King, these are for you and your husband. Notice of foreclosure and immediate possession. You are illegally occupying the property." My mother stared at the papers. "Illegally occupying? But we live here. We have lived here for 30 years. "Not according to the deed," the man said, touching the brim of his cap. "You might want to call the number on the top sheet. Have a nice day, ma'am." By 10:15, the panic had set in. My phone in the Sovereign Tower remained silent, but I could see the chaos on the tracking apps. Darius called my father. My father called Darius. Then they both called the lawyer who had helped them set up the business initially. I imagined the conversation. They were looking for a loophole. They were looking for a mistake. But there were no mistakes. The paperwork was ironclad. I had paid top dollar for the best real estate attorneys in Georgia to ensure that when the trap snapped shut, it would not loosen. At 10:30, my dedicated hotline for NK Holdings rang. I let it go to voicemail once just to establish dominance. Then I signaled Sarah, my assistant, to pick it up on the second attempt. I sat in my chair listening in on the speaker. NK Holdings Asset Management. Sarah said, her voice cool and professional. Hello, it was Darius. He was hyperventilating. His voice was an octave higher than usual. I am calling about a mistake. A huge mistake. Some goon just came to my store and put a sign on the door. He says you people own my building. Sir, can I have the case number on the document? Sarah asked, typing on a silent keyboard. Darius rattled off the number. Look, I don't know who you are, but my father, Reginald King, has owned this property since 1990. If you don't take that sign down, I am going to sue you for lost revenue. Do you know who I am? Sarah paused. One moment, sir. Let me pull up the file. She waited 10 agonizing seconds. Sir, I have the file here. According to the records, NK Holdings acquired the primary mortgage and the secondary liens on this property last Friday. The loan is in default. We have exercised our right to immediate possession. That is impossible, Darius screamed. We have a grace period. The bank said we had 30 days. The bank sold the note, Sarah replied calmly. NK Holdings does not offer grace periods on distressed assets. We liquidate. There was a silence on the line. I could hear my father breathing heavily in the background. He must have driven to the store. Let me talk to the owner. My father's voice came on the line. It was shaky, weak. Young lady, put me through to your boss. I can explain. This is a family business. We are good people. We just had a bad quarter. I can write a check today for $5,000. Just tell him to take the sign down. I leaned forward. This was the moment. The bargaining phase. He thought $5,000 would fix a $2 million hole. He thought his reputation as a good person mattered to a ledger. I typed a message to Sarah's screen. I am afraid the owner is not available, Sarah said, reading my words. And NK Holdings is not interested in a partial payment. We are interested in the asset. However, the owner has agreed to a brief meeting to discuss the terms of your exit. Exit. My father sounded like he was choking. We are not exiting. This is my life. The meeting is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Sarah continued, ignoring his plea. The Sovereign Tower. 45th floor. Bring all keys and access codes. If you do not appear, the sheriff will execute the physical eviction by noon. The Sovereign Tower. Darius asked, his voice changing. He sounded confused. Wait. The Sovereign Tower in Buckhead. That is correct. 9 a.m. Don't be late. Sarah hung up. I sat back in my chair. The bait was taken. The bait. In the car ride back to my parents' house, the reality of the location started to sink in for them. The Sovereign Tower was the most exclusive business address in the Southeast. It was a fortress of glass and steel where hedge funds and family offices managed billions. It wasn't the kind of place where predatory lenders or small-time crooks operated. This detail changed their narrative. I listened to the audio from the security camera in my parents' living room when they got back. They were sitting around the kitchen table, the eviction notices spread out like a losing hand of poker. Who is NK Holdings? My mother asked, wiping her eyes. I have never heard of them. It sounds corporate, Darius said, pacing the room. Sovereign Tower. That is big money, Pops. That is real money. Tiffany, who had been silent until now, picked up the eviction notice. She was looking at the logo I had designed. Minimalist. Gold on black. You know, she said slowly, a spark of hope returning to her eyes. This might not be a disaster. This might be an opportunity. My father looked at her like she was crazy. An opportunity, Tiffany? We are being kicked out of our home. Think about it, Reggie, Tiffany said, standing up and smoothing her dress. This isn't some bank algorithm. This is a private holding company. That means there is a person behind it. A person with enough money to buy millions in bad debt just like that. So Darius asked. So Tiffany continued walking to the mirror and checking her reflection. People with that kind of money are usually eccentric, or bored, or men. She turned to them with a smile that was equal parts predatory and delusional. NK Holdings. It probably stands for something like Norman Knight or Nathan Kane, some old billionaire who buys distressed companies as a hobby. He probably doesn't even know the details. He just has people handle it. What are you getting at? My father asked. I am saying that if we go there tomorrow and we make a good impression, we can turn this around, Tiffany said. We don't go there begging. We go there looking like partners. We tell him that the auto parts store is a gold mine that just needs a little capital. We charm him. She looked at Darius. I will wear my red dress, the one with the slit. Men like that appreciate class. I will do the talking. I will explain that this is all a misunderstanding. I bet I can get him to not only tear up this eviction, but maybe even invest more. Darius looked at his wife, and for the first time he didn't look jealous. He looked relieved. He was willing to pimp out his wife's charm to save his own skin. You think you can handle him? Darius asked. Tiffany laughed. Please. Rich old men are my specialty. They just want to feel important. I will stroke his ego. I will cry a little single tear about our family legacy, and he will be eating out of the palm of my hand. We will walk out of there with a new deal, maybe even a lower interest rate. My father looked skeptical, but he was desperate. He nodded slowly. Okay. Okay. We dress up. We go to the Sovereign Tower. We act like kings. I turned off the audio feed. I felt a wave of nausea mixed with amusement. Tiffany thought she was walking into a scene from a romance novel where the plucky heroine charms the grumpy tycoon. She thought she was going to use her sexuality and her manipulation tactics on a Norman or a Nathan. She had no idea she was walking into a cage match with Nia. She was going to wear her red dress. Good. I wanted her to look her best. I wanted the contrast to be sharp. I wanted her to see that her charm had no currency in my world. I looked at my own reflection in the darkened window of my office. I wasn't an old man, I wasn't bored, and I certainly wasn't looking for a partner. I picked up the phone and called security. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I have a party of 4 arriving. The King family. Send them straight up. And Jerry. Yes, Miss King. Make sure the elevator doesn't stop on any other floor. I want them to have the long ride up. I want their ears to pop. I want them to feel exactly how high up they are going. I hung up. The stage was set. The actors were rehearsing their lines, unaware that the script had already been rewritten. They were coming to negotiate. I was waiting to dictate. Tiffany wanted to meet the owner. She wanted to meet NK. She was about to find out that NK stood for Nia King. And the only thing I was going to be eating out of her hand was the deed to her life. Tomorrow, the mask comes off. Tomorrow, the takeover becomes official. I went home to sleep, but I knew I wouldn't dream. I didn't need dreams anymore. I had receipts. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Sovereign Tower took exactly 42 seconds. I timed it. For my family inside that steel and glass box, it must have felt like an eternity. I watched them on the security feed inside the cab. My father was adjusting his tie for the 10th time, wiping sweat from his forehead. My mother was clutching her purse, looking at the floor numbers climbing higher and higher. Darius was checking his reflection in the mirrored walls, trying to summon arrogance he didn't feel. And Tiffany was applying a fresh coat of red lipstick, practicing her smile. She was wearing the red dress with the high slit, just as she had promised. She looked like she was going to a cocktail party on the Titanic. When the doors slid open, they stepped out into the lobby of Kingston Quantitative. The air up here was different. It was cool-scented with white tea and money. The floors were polished concrete, and the walls were lined with abstract art that cost more than my father's entire laundromat chain. My assistant Sarah was waiting for them. She didn't smile. Mr. and Mrs. King. Sarah said, consulting her tablet. "And Mr. and Mrs. Darius King, please follow me. The owner is expecting you." They followed her down the long corridor. I could see them looking around, their eyes wide. They were intimidated. Good. They passed the trading floor where rows of analysts were glued to their screens, moving millions of dollars with a click of a mouse. Darius slowed down, looking at the setup with envy. He whispered something to Tiffany, probably about how this was what real business looked like. He had no idea he was walking through the engine room of the sister he despised. Sarah led them to the main conference room at the end of the hall. It was a glass box suspended over the city. The view was breathtaking, a 360-degree panorama of Atlanta. In the center of the room was a 20-foot table made of black marble, and at the head of that table, facing the window with its back to the door, was a single high-back leather chair. "Please have a seat," Sarah said, gesturing to the 4 chairs arranged on the opposite side of the table. They sat down. My father looked small in the designer ergonomic chair. My mother looked terrified. Tiffany, however, went straight into performance mode. She crossed her legs, showing off the slit in her dress, and cleared her throat. "Hello," she called out to the back of the chair. "Sir Mr. NK, we are so happy you agreed to meet with us. I am sure once we talk we can clear up this whole misunderstanding." I didn't move. I let the silence stretch. I let them sit in their discomfort for a few seconds longer. Tiffany looked at Darius, confused. "Maybe he is on the phone," she whispered. She tried again, louder this time. "Sir, my name is Tiffany King, and this is my husband, Darius. We represent the King family legacy. We understand you are a man of vision, and we think we could be great partners." I pressed the button under the armrest. The hydraulic motor hummed softly. Slowly, deliberately, I spun the chair around. I wasn't wearing a suit today. I was wearing a simple black turtleneck and diamond stud earrings. My face was completely devoid of expression. I rested my elbows on the armrests and interlaced my fingers. "Hello, family," I said. The reaction was instantaneous and chaotic. It was like dropping a Mentos into a Diet Coke bottle. Tiffany dropped her purse. Her mouth fell open so wide I could see her back molars. Darius choked on his own spit. My father grabbed the edge of the table, his eyes bugging out of his head. My mother just gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Darius sputtered. He stood up halfway, then sat back down. "What are you doing here?" Tiffany was the first to recover her voice, although her brain hadn't quite caught up yet. She laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh my God, Nia, you scared us. What are you doing? Are you bringing us coffee?" I stared at her. "Coffee?" Tiffany continued, her voice getting shrill. "Did you get a job here? Is that it? You are the office assistant. Look, that is great for you, really, but we are here to meet the owner. We have a very important meeting with Mr. NK, so if you could just go get him and maybe bring us some water while you are at it." She actually believed it. Her narcissism was so profound that she couldn't process the visual evidence in front of her. She saw me in a power suit, in a power chair, in a power office, and her mind immediately demoted me to servant. I didn't answer her. I simply reached out and tapped the crystal nameplate sitting on the table in front of me. I slid it forward so it caught the light. Nia King, CEO and founder. Tiffany stopped talking. She looked at the nameplate. She looked at me. She looked back at the nameplate. "I am not the assistant, Tiffany," I said, my voice echoing in the glass room. "And I am certainly not getting you water." Darius stood up, pointing a shaking finger at me. "This is a joke. This is a prank, right? You broke in here. You paid someone to let you in so you could embarrass us. This isn't real. You drive a Honda Civic, Nia. You are broke." I pressed a button on the console built into the table. The blinds on the far wall lowered automatically, darkening the room. A massive 80-inch screen descended from the ceiling. "Sit down, Darius," I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of authority. It was the voice I used to close billion-dollar deals. Darius sat. He didn't want to, but his legs gave out. Let's look at the numbers, I said. The screen flickered to life. The first slide appeared. It was a bar graph. A very tall green bar next to a tiny, almost invisible red bar. This, I said, pointing a laser pointer at the green bar, is the audited net income of Kingston Quantitative for the last fiscal year. $60 million. My father made us sound like a dying animal. 60 million, yes, Dad, I said. While you were screaming at me for not having a husband, I was building the most sophisticated algorithmic trading firm in the Southeast. While you were telling me to go live in the streets, I was buying the block. I clicked the remote. The slide changed. This, I continued, pointing to the tiny red bar, is the total debt load of the King family, $2.4 million, including the commercial mortgage, the vendor liens, and the fraudulent hard money loan Darius took out in your name. I looked at Darius. He was pale, sweating profusely. I bought it all, I said. Every single cent. I bought the note from Peachtree Bank at 60 cents on the dollar. I bought the debt from Quick Capital at 80 cents. I clicked the remote again. A copy of the deed to my parents' house appeared on the screen. It had a new stamp on it. Owner, Phoenix Holdings. And Phoenix Holdings, I said, leaning forward, is me. I am the shell company. I am the investor. I am the shark. I looked at Tiffany. She had slumped back in her chair, her red dress looking ridiculous in the cold fluorescent light of the presentation. So to answer your question, Tiffany, I said, my eyes locking onto hers. I am not the janitor. I am the person who owns the chair you are sitting on. I own the table. I own this building. And as of Friday afternoon, I own the house you sleep in and the store where you buy your husband's fake Gucci belts. The silence in the room was heavy. It was the silence of a worldview shattering. My father was looking at me, but he wasn't seeing his daughter anymore. He was seeing a stranger who was infinitely more powerful than he had ever been. You, my father whispered, you did this. You bought our debt. I nodded. Yes. Why? He asked, his voice trembling. To save us. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. To save you? No, Dad. If I wanted to save you, I would have written you a check. This isn't charity. This is an acquisition. I stood up and walked around the table. I paced slowly behind them like a teacher inspecting an unruly class. I tried to help you as a daughter, I said. I offered to help fix the inventory system years ago. You told me I didn't know business. I tried to warn you about Darius's gambling. You told me I was jealous. I tried to just exist in your house. You told me to get out. I stopped behind Darius's chair. I put my hand on the back of it. He flinched. So I decided to speak the only language you people understand. Leverage. I didn't buy your debt to be nice. I bought it because I am evicting the incompetence from the King family legacy. I walked back to the head of the table and leaned against it, crossing my arms. Tiffany, I said. You wanted to negotiate with the owner. Go ahead. Charm me. Use your red dress. Tell me why I shouldn't throw you and your husband out on the street right now. Tiffany opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her power was gone. Her sexuality was useless here. Her manipulation tactics didn't work on the person who had watched her invent them. She started to cry. Not the pretty single tear she had planned, but ugly sobbing. Nia, please, she blubbered. We didn't know. We are family. Family, I repeated. Interesting word. Was I family when you gave me a trash bag of old clothes? Was I family when you tried to trick me into signing a $2 million guarantee? I turned to my father. Was I family when you threw a plate at my head, Dad? My father looked down at his hands. They were shaking. He looked old suddenly. Defeated. I was angry, he stammered. I didn't mean it. You meant every word I said. And that is fine. I accept it. But now you have to accept your new reality. I clicked the remote one last time. A new slide appeared. It was a list of terms. Term sheet. Number 1, I read aloud. Darius is fired. Immediately. He is banned from the premises of King's Auto Parts. He is not allowed to touch a register, a computer, or a wrench. Darius looked up. You can't do that. That is my company. It is my company, I corrected him. You drove it into the ground. You are done. Number 2, I continued. Tiffany, you have 24 hours to return the company credit card, and I want the receipts for every purse, every shoe, and every dinner you bought with company funds. If the total exceeds $50,000, which I know it does, you will work out a payment plan, or I will prosecute you for embezzlement. Tiffany wailed, burying her face in her hands. Number 3, I said, looking at my parents. You can stay in the house. My mother looked up, hope flooding her eyes. Really? Oh, Nia, thank you. I held up a hand. Under one condition. You are no longer owners. You are tenants. You will sign a lease agreement. The rent will be $3,000 a month deducted automatically from Dad's pension, and I will hold the deed. My father's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to argue. He looked like he wanted to scream about respect and being the man of the house. But then he looked at the screen. He looked at the $60 million figure. And he realized he had no cards left to play. Do you accept these terms? I asked. There was a long silence. Then slowly, painfully, my father nodded. Yes. Good. I walked back to my chair and sat down, spinning it to face them again. Sarah, I called out. Sarah opened the door instantly. Yes, Ms. King. Please escort my tenants to the legal department on the 30th floor to sign the paperwork. And Sarah, yes, validate their parking. I don't want them to say I never gave them anything. I watched them stand up. They moved slowly like people walking underwater. Darius wouldn't look at me. Tiffany was a mess of smeared mascara. My mother looked shell-shocked. My father looked broken. As they reached the door, my father stopped. He turned around. He looked at me sitting in the high-backed leather chair, the city of Atlanta spread out behind me like a kingdom. I didn't know, he whispered. I really didn't know. I know, Dad. I said, picking up a pen and going back to my work. That was always the problem. You never looked. The door closed. I was alone in the glass box. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt resolved. The balance sheet was finally balanced. The debt was paid. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one paying it. The ink was barely dry on the surrender documents when I decided to drop the final bomb. Sarah was already gathering the papers, preparing to escort my family out of the conference room. They looked defeated. They looked like refugees fleeing a war zone they had started. But there was one person in the room who still had a flicker of defiance in her eyes. Tiffany. She was smoothing down her red dress, wiping the mascara from her cheeks. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was calculating. She was thinking that even though Darius was ruined, maybe she could salvage a relationship with me. Maybe she could pivot. She was a survivor in the worst sense of the word. Wait, I said. My voice stopped Sarah in her tracks. Everyone froze. My father looked up hopefully, thinking I might offer a mercy clause. Darius stopped sniffling. I am not done, I said. I swiveled my chair toward Tiffany. There is one last item of business. Call it a personnel matter. Tiffany offered a shaky smile. What is it, Nia? If you need help redecorating the office, I have a great eye for design. I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I can be an asset to you. I picked up the remote control again. Darius, I said, looking at my brother. You embezzled $50,000 from the family business. You claimed you used it to pay vendors. You lied. Then you claimed you lost it in the crypto market. You lied about that too. Darius frowned. What are you talking about? I told you I lost it on Moonrocket Coin. You lost 40,000 on crypto, I corrected him. But the first 10,000. The initial withdrawal you made the day after Dad kicked me out. That didn't go to a crypto exchange. It went to the Four Seasons Hotel in Midtown. Darius looked confused. The Four Seasons, I never stayed there. I know you didn't, I said. But your wife did. I clicked the remote. The screen changed. It wasn't a spreadsheet this time. It was a series of photographs. High-resolution photos taken by the private investigator I had hired 2 weeks ago. The first photo showed Tiffany entering the hotel lobby. She looked radiant happy. The second photo showed her at the hotel bar having a drink with a man. A tall, muscular man who was definitely not Darius. He was her personal trainer, the one she paid $300 an hour for using my father's money. The third photo showed them entering the elevator together. The fourth showed them kissing in the hallway outside room 402. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than the silence during the bankruptcy reveal. This was the silence of a man's soul breaking. Darius stared at the screen. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. He looked at the date stamp on the photos. It was the same day he had been crying in his office about making payroll. Tiffany, Darius whispered. His voice was so small it barely carried across the marble table. Tiffany stood up. Her face went from pale to a deep blotchy red. That is not what it looks like. We were just talking. He was comforting me because I was so stressed about your failure. I clicked the remote again. A copy of a credit card statement appeared. Room service for 2, champagne, oysters, charged to the corporate Amex. You paid for your affair with the money Darius stole from his father, I said, my voice cold and clinical. You were eating oysters while your husband was forging signatures to keep you in designer shoes. Darius made a sound that was half scream, half sob. He turned to Tiffany. I committed a felony for you. I ruined my life for you, and you were with him, that meathead trainer. Tiffany's face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. The charm was gone. The pretense was gone. So what, she screamed at Darius. Look at you. You are a loser. You have always been a loser. You promised me a yacht and you couldn't even buy me a rowboat. I needed a real man. Someone who doesn't have to ask his daddy for permission to breathe. She turned to me expecting some kind of female solidarity. Nia, you understand, right? You know what it is like to be stuck with dead weight. I can help you run this company. I know where Darius hid the rest of the cash. I can testify against him. Just give me a job. Give me a consulting contract. I will divorce him today. We can be a team. The audacity was breathtaking. She was willing to sell out her husband in seconds, just to stay adjacent to wealth. I looked at her with pure disgust. Tiffany, I said, you are not a partner. You are a liability, and I don't keep liabilities on my books. I nodded to the door where 2 large uniformed security guards had just appeared. Get her out of here, I said. And if she tries to take anything from the house other than her toothbrush, call the police. No. Tiffany screamed as the guards grabbed her arms. You can't do this. I am a victim here. Nia, please. We are sisters. I am not your sister, I said. I am your landlord, and you are trespassing. They dragged her out. Her screams echoed down the hallway until the elevator doors dinged shut, cutting off the noise. Darius was slumped over the table, his head in his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He had lost his business, his money, and his wife in the span of 30 minutes. I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. Darius, I said, look at me. He raised his head. His eyes were red and swollen. You are fired, I said. He nodded slowly. I know. I want your keys, your access badges, and the company car. You can leave the keys at the front desk. How am I supposed to get home? He asked, his voice cracking. I shrugged. There is a bus stop on Peachtree Street. Or maybe you can walk. It will give you time to think about the $50,000 you stole. Darius stood up. He looked at his father, but Dad wouldn't look at him. Dad was staring at the table, unable to witness the total destruction of the son he had idolized. Darius walked to the door. He paused, looking back at me one last time. I am sorry, Nia, he whispered. I didn't answer. Sorry doesn't pay the interest on a default loan. I turned back to my papers. When the door closed behind him, it was just me, my parents, and the low hum of the air conditioning. My mother was weeping softly, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. My father sat like a statue. His posture collapsed, his arrogance evaporated. Reggie King, the man who ruled his household with an iron fist, was gone. In his place was a tenant facing his property manager. He slid out of his chair. Slowly, painfully, he lowered himself until his knees hit the carpet. "Reggie," my mother gasped. "What are you doing?" My father didn't answer her. He clasped his hands together and looked up at me. There were tears in his eyes, genuine tears of humiliation and regret. "Nia," he said, his voice shaking. "I am sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I bet on the wrong child. I treated you like garbage, and you were the diamond all along. Please, can you forgive me? Can we start over? I will do anything. I will work for you. I will sweep the floors. Just please don't look at me with that coldness. It breaks my heart." I looked down at him. My father. The man who taught me to be strong. The man who threw a plate at my head 3 weeks ago. A part of me, the little girl who wanted his approval, wanted to rush over and hug him, wanted to tell him it was okay, wanted to lift him up and restore his dignity. But I wasn't a little girl anymore. I was a CEO. And if I lifted him up now, he would never learn. He would think that tears were a currency that could buy forgiveness. He would think that he could abuse me and then reset the clock with an apology. I stayed in my chair. I didn't offer him a hand. I didn't offer him a tissue. "Get up, Dad," I said. My voice was calm but firm. "You are wrinkling your suit. And since I paid for that suit, I would prefer you keep it in good condition." He froze. The rejection hit him like a physical blow. He realized I wasn't going to give him the movie moment he wanted. I wasn't going to cry and embrace him. He struggled to his feet, leaning on the table for support. He looked older than I had ever seen him. "I have prepared a lease agreement," I said, sliding a document across the marble. "It is for 12 months, renewable at my discretion." My father looked at the paper. He didn't read it. He just stared at the signature line. "The rent is $3,000 a month," I explained. "However, I know you don't have liquidity right now, so I have taken the liberty of setting up a direct garnishment from your pension fund. The money will transfer to Phoenix Holdings on the 1st of every month." My mother gasped. "His pension? But Nia, that is all we have to live on." "It is not all you have," I said, looking at her. "You have a roof over your head. You have heat. You have water. Things that you told me I wouldn't have when you kicked me out. I am being generous. The market rate for that house is $5,000. I am giving you a family discount." My father picked up the pen. His hand shook as he hovered over the paper. "Is this how it is going to be?" he asked, looking at me. "Just business. No Sunday dinners, no Christmas." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had watched me be bullied by his son and his daughter-in-law for years and did nothing. "We can have dinner," I said. "Once a month, if the rent is paid on time, and if I am not busy acquiring another company. But we will eat at my house, and I will choose the menu. And if anyone throws a plate, they will be escorted out by security." My father lowered his head. He signed the paper. It was done. The transfer of power was complete. He pushed the paper back to me. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not putting us on the street." I took the contract and placed it in my folder. "You are welcome," I said. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a board meeting in 10 minutes. Sarah will show you out." My parents walked to the door. They looked small against the vast backdrop of the Atlanta skyline. They looked like guests in a world they didn't understand. "Goodbye, Nia," my mother said softly. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad." The door clicked shut. I was alone. I swiveled my chair around to face the window. The city was spread out before me, a grid of lights and ambition. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. It tasted clean. It tasted like freedom. I hadn't gotten the apology I dreamed of as a child. I hadn't gotten the warm, fuzzy family reunion. But I had gotten something better. I had gotten respect, and I had gotten it the only way the world respects anything. I bought it. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank balance. The acquisition funds had cleared. My net worth had dipped slightly to cover the debt, but the projected revenue from the restructured auto parts business would recoup that in 6 months. It was a good deal. I stood up and walked to the camera that had been recording the entire meeting for legal purposes. I looked directly into the lens. They told me I was worthless. They told me to go live in the streets. They thought that because I was quiet, I was weak. They thought that because I was a woman, I was soft. I leaned in closer, my eyes hard and unblinking. I didn't just survive the streets. I bought the pavement. I bought the buildings. I bought the debt, and I bought their respect. So here is my advice to you. When people tell you that you are nothing, don't argue with them. Don't cry. Don't beg for their validation. Just work, build, compound your interest. And one day, when they are on their knees asking for a lease, you can look them in the eye and tell them the price just went up. Never let anyone appraise your value. You are the only one who knows what you are worth, and tax is not included. I reached out and covered the lens. The screen went black. End of transaction.